Battalion 1944 was first announced way back in early 2016 with a Kickstarter campaign. The game promised a World War II experience that recaptured the core of the classic shooters of old, and it's being developed by Bulkhead Interactive, who are based in Derby, UK. The early access version of the game will cost $15 on Steam when it releases on February the 1st. If you like games like Enemy Territory, Day of Defeat and the Call of Duty titles, COD 4 and COD 2 in particular, or even the most recent Call of Duty, then there is a very good chance that you're going to like Battalion 1944. It's very hard to get away from those comparisons, with the most recent COD game being based in World War II. I think you'll hear a lot of people compare the games, and even though Battalion is trying to push forward its competitive angle, its similarities to Call of Duty are impossible to avoid for a lot of people. That being said, Battalion 1944 aims to stand on its own 2 feet, and for what I've seen and played so far, it's doing a good job at what it set out to do. The closed beta kicked off a couple of days ago, and with it came a handful of maps to try out, as well as a few modes that aren't really going to surprise you. When you launch the game, you can pick between arcade and competitive currently. A server browser and unranked options will be available down the line. Arcade puts you into a playlist of Team Deathmatch, Capture the Flag and Domination. You can't pick which one you want to play right now, it just puts you into a playlist. I'd like to be able to pick, to be honest with you, which mode I want when the game fully releases. And then you've got the competitive game mode, which will require you to be at least rank 10 to play. Speaking of which, Wartide is Battalion's competitive game mode, and at its core, it's search and destroy, but it's got a twist in the form of an economy of sorts. If you play CSGO for instance, you'll know that each round you need to buy your weapons, armor and grenades. If you keep spending a lot of money but your team keeps losing, then you'll end up with no money and as such poor weapons. Wartide doesn't have a monetary system, so to speak, but instead a card system. When you start a game, your team has a certain amount of class tokens, 3 of each, and then 8 tokens for both types of grenades, high explosive and smoke. Say I take the marksman class, that will reduce my team's class tokens by 1 down to 2. If we keep using them and dying, that means that we'll have 0 tokens left to spawn as a marksman anymore, leaving us at a disadvantage. However, there are ways of gaining them back. When you die, you drop a token above your body. If your teammate picks up the token upon your death, you'll then regain that class token and it will be put back into the team's pool. The same can be said for enemies' tokens. Say you kill the enemy marksman, if you can get his token, not only do you add another token to your team's pool, but you also deny the enemy team from regaining it. Now, the only class that doesn't require a token is the default class. This class has unlimited usages and as such doesn't drop a token on death. The idea is that a team needs to really balance what classes they're using during each round, depending on what their economy is looking like. Just to be clear, these tokens don't impact the ability to pick up a weapon off the ground. Say that you're playing as a marksman and you want to pick up a rifleman's kit after you killed them, you can still do that, but it's not going to carry over between rounds. This game at its core is a 5 versus 5 game, but according to their Kickstarter, the devs do aim to give players admin control over their own servers, which would enable server admins to decide if they want to play, say, 5v5 domination or 16-player free-for-all. Being able to control how you run your servers to that extent is something that a lot of players want from modern games, but it always seems to be an afterthought these days. With older games, it was just always present, that's how it was, so it's a good thing for the longevity of this game. That being said, Joe Brammer, the studio head, has said that while you can alter player counts, point allocations and scoring objectives, anything beyond that will more likely need to be a mod. Also, you won't be able to modify the Wartide game mode at all, for reasons I'll get into shortly. So what about that mod support then? Well, in a recent PC Gamer interview, Joe Brammer said that he came from the modding scene when he was much younger, and he wants Battalion to offer a platform for other people to be able to create something amazing. He suggested adding a new faction like the Gurkhas, or a new competitive map perhaps. What this does do is open up the possibilities for the game immensely. Having mod support means the community can make all sorts of tweaks to the game, from brand new user created maps to competitive mods. Not that it needs one, as that's the focus of the game anyway, but you get the point. Pro mod in Call of Duty 4 was extremely successful, and this game mirrors it a lot. A lot of the most popular Counter-Strike maps started life as community made maps, and most of them exist in the game even today. For a video game to be a competitive game, I think there are a few things that absolutely need to be in the game, in my opinion. They aren't a requirement, as plenty of games do it without them, but from my perspective there are a few things that you need. Dedicated servers, LAN support, and a solid anti-cheat, to name a few. Battalion will have all of these things. Dedicated servers is great to see, and LAN support for games is a really big feature that honestly most games these days have forgotten. When it comes to tournaments and competitions, it makes a huge difference. Anti-cheat, well, that speaks for itself. And that leads me on to tournaments, but before I do, I want to talk about the cosmetic items in this game. Battalion will have something called war chests. These are crates that contain cosmetic items that are, and I quote, tastefully relevant weapon skins. These can be purchased in the Battalion armory in-game. You also get one every time you rank up. Now when you purchase one of these cosmetic crates, if you choose to do so, a portion of this will go to investing in future game content such as maps, weapons, etc., but also tournament prize money. This is a very similar system to how Valve have operated. When you buy a key to open a crate in CSGO or in Dota 2, some of that money is used to fund the insane prize money in their invitational competitions or majors. It's worth noting though that when it comes to those games, they have massive player numbers, and as such, crates and cosmetics earn them a lot of money. Putting a portion of that money into a tournament prize pool isn't that much of an issue for them. For this system to work though for Battalion, the game really has to be successful. If it doesn't have a large player base, then those crates aren't going to be making a great deal of money. And the majority of people playing this game in particular are going to be the hardcore FPS shooter players who don't care about graphics, they put everything on low, and they don't really care about skins or cosmetics. So the majority of the people playing this game I don't think are actually going to buy the crates or any cosmetics at all. It needs to have a large player base of the average Joe gamer to fully take advantage of that cosmetic business model, in my opinion. And I'll get into the game's popularity shortly, but Bulkhead wants this to be a popular game, they want it to be a competitive game, and clearly tournaments are on their mind, but they do cost a lot of money to run. From a recent interview with Joe Brammer again, he suggested that Square Enix, the game's publisher, have given them a big prize pool for future tournaments. Of course I've mentioned the Valve-like system for cosmetics, but if you've got a big publisher behind you offering money, that can gain a lot of interest. I briefly mentioned before that Wartide, the competitive game mode, will be restricted when it comes to server admins. The reason for that is that this is their main competitive mode and they don't want anything to mess with leaderboards or ranking systems. That's right, similar to CSGO, you will be able to play competitive matches and gain ranks until you reach the top, or the bottom. So that's a bit of backstory and history for you, but how is the game, how does it play? Honestly, it plays incredibly similar to Call of Duty 2 and Call of Duty 4 Pro Mod, which I know was a partial inspiration for the game. Movement on the surface is fairly simple and straightforward, but with practice and skill, you can do some incredible jumps between objects, and the better players with better movement can definitely stand out of the crowd. There are no soldier ability unlocks or anything like that. In fact, it's not part of their ethos. The game really is based around individual skill. What works best in the game, for me personally, is the gunplay. You'll get used to weapons like the Thompson, Kar 98, M1 Garand, World War II era weapons that you would expect to find here, but the gunplay itself feels very crisp and sharp. Each weapon feels different and has its own advantages and disadvantages. The time to kill, as you would expect, is also incredibly fast, and again it's dependent on the weapon that you're using. Bolt action snipers, for the most part, are a one-shot kill, and getting those crazy no-scopes or quick-scopes is extremely satisfying. It does remind me of all of those quick-scope montages from years gone by. The snipers have no scope sway, so you only have to worry about aiming. Graphically, the game doesn't look great in my opinion, but there's definitely a design decision behind that. The game is running on Unreal Engine 4, so it's got plenty of juice behind it, but this isn't trying to be Battlefield 1. It's not attempting to have the best visuals it possibly can, and instead it's trying to have good gameplay, and I think it's one of the reasons that the maps look just really basic and bland in areas, and I think that's because that they're intentionally trying to make the maps look more clean, looking say Pro Mod from COD 4, ensuring that they look okay for the most part, but they aren't filled with clutter and useless props that you're going to get stuck on. Sure, that can look visually impressive, but it isn't great for gameplay. I think when some people look at the game, they'll also think that it looks dated and just turn it away, but honestly, I think it's an intentional decision. Also, you have to remember that the game is still pretty early in development, and this is by no means the final product. So who knows, if you want to play at high graphics 6 months down the line, the game might look pretty decent. And if you haven't worked it out already, graphics don't really matter, the gameplay is the most important thing, but on the surface, some potential customers will definitely look at it, watch videos of it, and think, it looks bland, it looks like an old game, I'll just give it a hard pass. I do have some real concerns about this game though. I applaud the developers for starting a studio, beginning a Kickstarter, and eventually getting Square Enix to publish this game for them. I think what they've done here is produced a game that they really set out to do. But I do have some big concerns about Battalion 1944. I think the gameplay is good, and I loved the Call of Duty titles of old. They offered fantastic gameplay, and I think there will be some die-hard fans of this game who absolutely love this type of gameplay, and they'll just play it non-stop. However, if you look at this objectively, and I'm thinking from a general consumer standpoint for a second, let's say that they see this game on YouTube or in a trailer. Will they see enough differences in this game to make them buy it over, say, Call of Duty World War II, which to a lot of people looks remarkably similar? The problem here is that I think while Battalion does a lot of things right, it doesn't really do much different from other games around it and anything new. It's a competitive game mode, and it's got a bit of a twist with the economy, and I'm absolutely sure that the game will offer more game modes down the line before it releases. The question is though, is this type of fast-paced, old-school COD gameplay really that popular anymore? I like it in a certain aspect because it reminds me of COD Pro Mod and COD 2. They've absolutely nailed that feeling in Battalion. But personally, I feel like I'm over that now. I've been there and I've done that in games 10 years ago. Nowadays, I don't enjoy being killed by someone dolphin diving or spraying at me with a Tommy gun whilst they fly through the air from a big jump off a wall. You can do that in this game, and if you play it, it's going to happen a lot. That's the nature of a fast-paced shooter like Battalion. You should know what you're getting into, and if people can do that to gain an advantage and kill you rather than you killing them, they're going to do it. But from my perspective, and from what I've learned being involved in the games industry, the majority of PC shooter fans nowadays are enjoying the slower, more tactical games, and they've left those arcadey arena games behind. I love that the shooter market has evolved and changed into different experiences. And let me say this, a game doesn't need to sell 1 million copies to be successful, nor does it need 100,000 players every day. Success is relative. If the game is good, and it certainly seems to be to me, and the player base who play it are happy, then it doesn't need to compete with other games. My point is only that it really depends on how much money Bulkhead have invested and how much money they need to get back to keep the studio happy. I think Battalion is a very promising game, especially from a competitive standpoint, but I just don't see it being a big commercial success, and I think a lot of people who are playing it right now, streaming it, won't be doing so on a regular basis when it releases. It will be down to the die-hard community, and like I said, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that, providing it's sustainable, and I hope it is. At the end of the day, Battalion started life as a Kickstarter game, and it's raised over £300,000, so there's quite clearly a bit of interest in it, undoubtedly. It somewhat reminds me of another game, Quake Champions. They're a very well made game, and Quake has always had a great community, and while I don't know the actual player numbers of the game, I suspect that it isn't massively big, but it doesn't have to be. It's a great game, and providing the community are enjoying the game, and Bethesda in this case keep updating it without the concern for money, as it's a free to play game, then I see no problem. Battalion 1944 is still very early in development, but the closed beta this weekend is the first time that the masses have got to experience the game outside of closed off tests and events. It's then due to hit early access on 1st of February. If you're longing to play a multiplayer first-person shooter that reminds you of COD 2 and COD 4 Pro Mod, give it a shot. It's only $15 and you'll help support a new and upcoming developer. And that's all for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this look at Battalion 1944. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you liked the video, give it a like. If you didn't, dislike. Subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you in the next one.